Okay, Jessie, I just want to say it is fascinating the whole history, and I'm going to add the link to your thesis and to more of your work, and we'll continue that conversation. But meanwhile, I wanted to really ask you about how did you hear about the Smarter Web company and how did you get involved?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I've been a Bitcoiner for quite some time. And a little after I became a Bitcoiner and was posting as Croesus, Michael Saylor arrived on the scene. And then, he kind of stumbled into over a few years what has become Bitcoin treasury strategy, right? It started by just putting your cash reserves into Bitcoin. Then Saylor realized, you know what, I don't need to stop there. I can use capital market tools to raise debt and use that debt to buy Bitcoin and sort of fulfilling what Pierre Rochard wrote about in 2014, speculative attack, arbitraging fiat into Bitcoin. If you understand that fiat is designed to depreciate in value because of the sort of targeted 2% inflation that they aim for. Meanwhile, Bitcoin's design is designed to appreciate in value because of its increasing scarcity of new supply issuance over time with a finite amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist. If you understand that, then you want to be long Bitcoin and short the dollar or the pound. And that's what Saylor and MicroStrategy sort of embarked on. They figured out how best to execute that strategy. And as we've seen over the last 5 years, it's been tremendously successful for them. A couple years ago now, Dylan LeClaire kind of took a leap and joined this failing Japanese hotel company that, with the hope of trying to start that MicroStrategy model from scratch, basically and at that point in time, people said that, yeah, it's great that MicroStrategy can do this model, but you can't do it unless you have a big legacy software business that has a ton of cash flows. And MetaPlanet, as we've seen over the last 2 years almost, has proven that wrong. You can do it. And what they rolled out has been, they went from a 10 million market cap to 3.5 billion market cap. And they're definitely not done yet, I think.
Stopping.
And Dylan has been a friend in the Bitcoin space ever since he found his way to Bitcoin as like a 19-year-old. I was putting out content at that time, so I've been exchanging messages with him since the beginning of his Bitcoin journey, really. And I've worked with him a little bit too, and I happened to have a conversation with Michael Saylor on a podcast a year and a half ago. And I asked him, what do you say to Bitcoiners who are all in already, never sell your Bitcoin, but now there's MicroStrategy, which has this promise of growing your Bitcoin ownership. And he cut right to it and said, there's still a place for risk capital in a portfolio. Bitcoin may be the risk-free rate for Bitcoiners, but there's still a place for risk capital. And that really resonated. I, mulled that over for a number of months. And then I saw Dylan at Saylor's K New Year's party, which was just over a year ago now. And I was talking with him about MetaPlanet, and that led to us having a 90-minute conversation a few weeks later on the phone, where he was very generous with his time and just kind of showed me how scalable this model was and how excited he was about continuing to execute on it. And that kind of was a big unlock for me that this is going to happen everywhere. This is going to happen in the US and in Japan, but it's also going to happen in every capital market in the world because Bitcoin is for everyone. And that means every individual, but also every company. And currently, as of a year ago, there weren't any companies with a balance sheet built on Bitcoin in most capital markets in the world. And so it became quite evident to me that there was an opportunity to be a part of, the MetaPlanet for whatever jurisdiction. So I, got more involved in the Bitcoin treasury side of the Bitcoin Twitter sphere, and put out analysis about the scale of what's happening, and including, my sort of thesis there is that Bitcoin treasury companies will be the primary vehicles that will provide the bid for Bitcoin over the coming decades, because they will be the conduits through which TradFi capital, especially fixed income capital and overvalued equities capital, will seek value, and they will come to Bitcoin through Bitcoin treasury companies. Because Bitcoin treasury companies will design the products that meet them on their terms, especially with fixed income and money market. And then in terms of equities, I think that a well-run Bitcoin treasury company is still, has always been very undervalued relative to other equities. When you think about it in PE terms, price to earnings ratio terms, many of these equities are, trading at 30, 50, 100x their earnings. And then if you think about a Bitcoin treasury company like Strategy, they delivered plus 20% in terms of Bitcoin per share in 2025, a little over that. And what's the value of that? What's the value of an asset that grows your Bitcoin ownership by 20% a year? In my opinion, that's extremely valuable. And the fact that the market is currently pricing that at just over X,
crazy.
The value of their Bitcoin is hugely undervalued, in my opinion. So anyway, those conversations and then me digging into it led me to be very bullish about Bitcoin treasury companies as the next major step of Bitcoin's maturation as a financial asset. I think it's how Bitcoin will integrate itself into the fabric of global finance. It'll be through these equitized Bitcoin products, and that's going to happen everywhere. And then Smarter Web. Andrew Webley popped up on my radar. He wasn't a known Bitcoiner before last spring, and then suddenly he was executing on the MetaPlanet playbook faster than anybody in the world, and I wanted to join it. In part because if you think about what are the best capital markets in the world to execute the Bitcoin treasury strategy, I think it's in order. I think it's the U.S., Japan, and the UK. And the UK, people forget, but it's the second most important capital market in the world. And that's the legacy of the British Empire. London is the home of international banking. It's the home of gold custody and all sorts of capital intermediation. And there's a ton of capital that flows through London. And whoever becomes the best capitalized digital capital business, meaning the business with the cleanest, biggest Bitcoin balance sheet, gets to run the MicroStrategy playbook in the UK for all of that capital that exists there and flows through London. So the opportunity there is tremendous. Japan is slightly better because of the sovereign debt levels there, and the yield rates that you can get on debt in Japan are 50 bips, which is incredibly low, and that means that fixed income instruments powered by Bitcoin become that much more compelling. So all that to say that those are the three capital markets that I think this model is an incredible fit for. And obviously, Strategy is quite mature. MetaPlanet has been growing incredibly quickly and has plenty of growth still ahead of it. But Smarter Web is just over an order of magnitude smaller than MetaPlanet, and if you view it through that lens, I think there's that much more growth ahead for the leading Bitcoin treasury company in the UK. Yeah,
I really want to explore the opportunities that Bitcoin treasury companies have. And I know, obviously, and I'm biased, but the Smarter Web company is leading the way. But like you say, it's how well the business is run, what, the strategy and the communication and the education that's involved at this really critical stage in ensuring that there is trust in this whole process. And so as I focus on the UK, I'm looking at the ecosystem developing now here in the UK from the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, how it's viewed, what the regulations are, all of the sort of the frameworks that will give the City of London, like you say, one of the biggest capital markets in the world, and the legacy that it has, again from history, the confidence to move forward with a Bitcoin treasury strategy and how it's going to develop, like you say, network through the monetary system. So that's an area that I'd love to explore with you, because I think it's going to be new for a lot of people and new to understand how Bitcoin works, let alone the treasury strategy, the treasury company strategy holding Bitcoin on the balance sheet. What does that mean for a business? How can a business sort of safeguard their future with it? And what's it going to mean for the FTSE, for the indexes here? So yeah, I'd love to get your views on that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're talking about this, what comes to mind is a little framing from Saifedean in the Bitcoin Standard. Bitcoin's not a choice. People think it's a fun technology you can opt into, but Saifedean frames it as Bitcoin is gunpowder, where you don't have a choice about adopting gunpowder. You either adopt gunpowder or you get conquered by somebody who does. And that's obviously a pretty brutal way to view it, but I think that's right. Bitcoin is an economic reality that you can either see coming and adapt to, or it will happen to you because other people will adopt it, and you'll see the performance gap between those who adopt and those who don't. And that will only become clear after the fact. So that's what I think Bitcoin represents for everyone in the world. You can either choose to store your treasury in an asset that's going to appreciate something like 30% a year for the next decade or two. That's Michael Saylor's expectation, based in part on my framework. So that's what I think is going to be happening. You can choose to ride that uplift, or you can not, but others will. And the performance gap from that choice will be quite evident. The FTSE companies, I forget over what time frame, maybe the last decade, have averaged, I think, 6% returns a year, which is less than the money supply growth rate, which I think is the true indicator of inflation. So there has not been adequate performance in public companies in the UK. And if Smarter Web enjoys a 30% uplift plus whatever we can achieve in terms of Bitcoin per share growth, we're going to outperform everything in the FTSE landscape. If those numbers continue, then we end up becoming the strong performer for the next decade. And at some point, you need that in your portfolio, right? Like if you're trying to keep up with the index, at some point you need that strong performer in your portfolio. Otherwise, you're going to fall behind. So in that way, this is how Bitcoin wins, because you either adopt it proactively or you're forced to try to catch up because you didn't adopt it and you're now lagging behind those who did.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation, and we're going to be following the journey for the Smarter Web company as it progresses through the FTSE. So I wanted to say also congratulations, because you, the business, and when I say you and the business, that's the shareholders as well. And that's what makes the business, to me, unique in the landscape here in the UK, is that we're really focused on the shareholders. That's where we're all part of the business. And so you took a number of shareholders to the London Stock Exchange to get the uplisting there, which must have been phenomenal. But what was that experience like for you?
It was quite surreal and a bit of a blur. It does happen quite quickly, but it was wonderful to have. We had almost 100 people there, I think half of them shareholders. And it was just great to be able to celebrate that milestone for the company and frankly for Bitcoin in the UK. I think we will look back on that hopefully we will look back on that as an inflection point for Smarter Web company and Bitcoin in the FTSE landscape. And the Smarter Web company is only possible because of the conviction and support of its shareholders. So Andrew has from the beginning cared deeply about doing right by retail investors. They are the backbone of this model. And frankly, that's what a lot of other Bitcoin treasury companies around the world seem to have missed is that the strength of a Bitcoin treasury company is the strength of its retail shareholders and their conviction and belief in the management team and the execution of the strategy. That's what you need first and foremost, and then you can build from there. You can't shortcut that. You have to build that trust in the community. And that's what Andrew's been focused on, and that's what Smarter Web is focused on, doing right by its retail shareholders. And so having them participate in the uplisting felt right, and I can't imagine doing it any other way. And the folks from LSE said, that they can't remember having so many people participate in a ring the bell ceremony, which I think is a testament to how different this company is, and the grassroots passion that Bitcoin taps into and Smarter Web is all about.
Yeah, and I think there's no way I could have explained that better myself. That's it. It's the commitment and the passion and the vision that we've all got. And that, again, goes back to your network effect. And that network is growing, and people see something better. And it's not just financial. It's a community network. People call us a cult, or they might say, well, there's this Bitcoin sort of mentality, but it's a business that's actually doing better for shareholders, to generate a better vision, something that's for the future, for the children, for the grandchildren, that's networked out as opposed to pyramided in what we've seen in the fiat culture. So yeah, totally fascinating. Brilliant to speak to you. A huge thank you. And yeah, I look forward to sort of digging deeper and following the journey for the Smarter Web company and for other Bitcoin treasury companies around the world and even in the UK, because it's an ecosystem that will only get stronger.
Completely agree. And yes, thank you for having me. Look forward to talking again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jessie.
This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, tax, or any other form of professional advice. Nothing in this episode, or any other, should be taken as a recommendation, endorsement, or invitation to buy, sell, or hold any cryptocurrency, tokenized asset, or other investment, or to engage in any specific strategy. Views expressed by the hosts and guests are personal opinions only and do not represent the views of any organizations they are affiliated with. The content may be inaccurate, incomplete, or become outdated at any time, and no liability is accepted for any loss or damage arising from reliance on it. Listeners should always do their own research and seek advice from an appropriately regulated professional before making any financial decisions.